Welcome to the second part of the chapter, Rise of Nationalism in Europe. In the previous EduRev video, we discussed the vision of a world of democratic and social republics, the French Revolution and the idea of a nation, and the making of nationalism in Europe. Let us now continue with the remaining part of the chapter. In the early 19th century, people were living in a time when their country was not their own, and the government was oppressive. What would they do? How far would they go to fight for their freedom? These were the questions facing people across Europe. The Age of Revolutions saw a wave of change sweep across the continent, with revolutions breaking out in various countries. From France to Greece, people stood up for their rights and fought for their independence. So, in this video, we'll explore the events of the Age of Revolutions. We will discuss about, first, the Age of Revolutions, 1830 to 1848, or the ordinary people who were affected by these changes. Second, the Romantic imagination and national feeling, or the role of culture and language. Third, hunger, hardship and popular revolt, or how did they cope with rising prices, bad harvests, and poverty. Fourth, 1848. The revolution of the liberals, or what role did they play in the revolutions that shook Europe to its core? Let us now start with the first topic. The Age of Revolutions, 1830 to 1848. In the early 19th century, the ideas of liberalism and nationalism were spreading rapidly across Europe, igniting a fire of revolution in many regions. The Italian and German states, the provinces of the Ottoman Empire, Ireland, and Poland were all swept up in this wave of change. But it was in France where the first upheaval took place in July 1830. The liberal revolutionaries installed a constitutional monarchy under Louis Philippe, marking a significant shift in the country's political landscape. It was a momentous shift that marked a turning point in French history. Meanwhile, nationalist feelings were also on the rise, particularly among the educated elite in Europe. The Greek War of Independence was one such event that mobilized these sentiments. The Greeks had been struggling for their independence since 1821, and their cause was supported by none other than the English poet, Lord Byron. Yes, you heard that right. Byron not only organized funds to help the Greeks, but he also went to fight in the war himself. Unfortunately, he died of fever in 1824, but his legacy lives on. Finally, after a long and hard-fought struggle, the Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized Greece as an independent nation. This was a significant victory for the Greeks and a witness to the power of revolutionary nationalism. But it wasn't just the educated elite who were affected by these changes. The 1830s saw a rise in prices, bad harvests, and poverty in Europe, which led to widespread unrest. Even the middle classes, who were usually more comfortable, were affected by these hardships and joined in the revolt. Now, let's move on to the second topic, that is, the Romantic imagination and national feeling. Do you know that even culture had a very crucial role in shaping the idea of the nation during the 19th century in Europe? Art, poetry, stories, and music helped express and shape nationalist feelings that people had for their own country. Have you ever heard of Romanticism? It was a cultural movement that sought to develop a particular form of nationalist sentiment. The Romantics believed that each country had its unique spirit that could be expressed through art and culture. For instance, the German philosopher Johann Gottfried Herder claimed that true German culture could be discovered among the common people. It was through folk songs, folk poetry, and folk dances that the true spirit of the nation was popularized. But it wasn't just music that played a role in developing nationalist sentiments. Language also played an essential role in developing nationalist sentiments. In Russia, the Russian language was imposed everywhere, and this led to an armed revolt against Russian rule in 1831, which was ultimately crushed. The use of Polish came to be seen as a symbol of the struggle against Russian dominance. So to conclude, these multiple factors played a critical role in bringing the people and uniting them for a common goal. As we have understood the role of culture and language, it's time to move on to the third one, which is hunger, hardship, and popular revolt. Also, do you know that CBSE repeats previous questions in board exams? So while studying any topic, you can also practice previous year's question papers to understand the level and the variety of questions that are asked in the exam. You can find past year's papers as well as their solutions on EduRev. Let us step back in time as we put light on some of the economic hardships that Europe and common people in Europe faced during the 19th century. It was a time of enormous change and growth, but it also brought with it some significant challenges. During the first half of the 19th century, there was a massive increase in population all over Europe. People from rural areas moved to the cities to find work but often ended up living in overcrowded slums. Small producers in towns faced stiff competition from cheap machine-made goods imported from England, where industrialization was more advanced than on the continent. But that's not all. In regions of Europe where the aristocracy still enjoyed power, peasants struggled under the burden of feudal dues and obligations. The rise of food prices or a year of bad harvest led to widespread poverty in towns and the countryside. In 1848, Paris was brought to its knees by a food shortage and widespread unemployment, leading to protests in the streets. However, people didn't just sit back and accept their fate in life. They fought back against the economic hardships that they faced. In 1845, weavers in Silesia led a revolt against contractors who supplied them with raw materials and gave them orders for finished textiles but drastically reduced their payments. As you can see, Europe faced significant economic challenges during the 19th century. It was a time of great change, and people were determined to make a better life for themselves and their families. As we come to the end of this topic, let's take a moment to reflect on the year 1848, the Revolution of the Liberals. During 1848, Europe was in the midst of a revolution led by the educated middle class. The people were demanding something that had never existed before, a nation-state on parliamentary principles. The middle class called for a constitution, freedom of the press, and freedom of association. It was a time of great political associations that came together in Frankfurt to vote for an all-German National Assembly. On the 18th of May 1848, 831 elected representatives marched to take their places in the Frankfurt Parliament convened in the Church of St. Paul. The constitution drafted for the German nation was headed by a monarchy, subject to a parliament. However, the crown was offered to Friedrich Wilhelm IV, King of Prussia, but he rejected it and joined other monarchs to oppose the elected assembly. But that didn't stop the middle class who dominated the parliament and a large number of women who participated in the liberal movement. Women formed their own political associations, founded newspapers and took part in political meetings and demonstrations, but they were still denied suffrage rights during the election of the assembly. In the years after 1848, the autocratic monarchies of Central and Eastern Europe began to introduce the changes that had already taken place in Western Europe before 1815. It was a time of great change as serfdom and bonded labor were abolished both in the Habsburg dominions and in Russia. So, students, as we come to the end, we can conclude that the revolution of 1848 wasn't just a political one, it was a social revolution too. As we continue to study, we will cover the remaining part of the chapter in the upcoming videos. Here's a secret on how you can study effectively on EduRev. You can learn with chapter notes, video lectures and solve MCQ tests of this chapter on EduRev to ensure you score well in your Class 10 board exams. Not just social studies, you get amazing courses for maths, science, English, Hindi, and much more on EduRev. Thank you.